everybody, welcome back to another episode of Jacey's Creek. My name is Emily and today we are doing Season 4, Episode 6, Great Expeditions. And if you don't know what this podcast is about, I'll tell you in a few sentences. So this is about how we discuss Pacey and Joey as a couple and as individuals, so that way we can go over it at the very end and who they are and how they changed. And a lot of the times I see stuff that I'm like, wow, that was in Season 2 and now it's Season 4. And I'm like, man, that's a big difference. And so I'll talk about that. And so right now, that is what we are talking about. And another thing, if you have not already, make sure to follow my Instagram, that's Witter and Potter, my TikTok, that's Pacey and Joey, and lastly, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so that way you don't miss any episodes, and I post every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So without further ado, let's get into this. So this episode came out on November 8th, 2000, so we believe according to Wikipedia. And this is scene 1 of Pacey and Joey. So, scene 1, they're outside the record store, and Joey and Pacey are walking up and down, joking and talking with one another. And Pacey says, "This town is sorely lacking in the post-mental activities." And Joey says, "Why do we always do a Bonnie and Clyde?" And Pacey says, "What, like hit a bank or go on a limb?" And Joey says, "Well, it could be a practical solution to our biggest two problems, money and boredom." And Pacey says, "Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. We can get ourselves one of those big honky scenarios. I can find myself a fiddle, and you can get yourself one of those Curtis box cameras, and then we can head out across the heartland. Thumbs on our nose at authorities, stopping occasionally. I guess take cute pictures of the loving gangster couple." I love how Pacey just made up this whole scenario in his head about that one little sentence that she said. And that's why I love their relationship. Like, they can just tease each other like this. And so Joey looks into the record store and sees Gretchen and Dawson listening to music together in one of the booths. And Pacey just thinks that she just wants to go in there. He's like, "Do you want to burn some time spinning some discs?" And Joey says, "Oh, nah, not right now. Come on." And she, drags him along. And I love how they were walking together. Like, they weren't walking, hand in hand. Like, she had her hand wrapped in his arms, and they were just walking down. I thought that was so funny to me. So then we have scene 2 of Pacey and Joey. And they are at Gretchen's place and Pacey's place. And Joey is sitting in front of a mirror fixing her hair while Gretchen is getting herself ready. And Pacey is standing in the kitchen just plainly watching them. Just nothing else. And Gretchen says, "It's been at least a dozen Raymonds and they've been great." And Joey says, "Oh yeah, hundreds of sweaty strangers packed together, being blasted with potentially air-damaged balloons. Oh, sounds great." And Gretchen laughs and she says, "Hey, I thought you were going to give this a chance." And Joey says, "I am. I'm actually really excited to check out this new revolution. And Pacey says, "No, aren't the raves just like high school dances but 10 times bigger?" And Gretchen says, "I used to love high school dances." And Pacey says, "Well, duh, you were the queen of every one of them you went to." And Gretchen says, "Well, duh, why do you think I love them? Hey, if you don't come, we are totally fine leaving here." And at one point, Pacey and Joey look at each other, and Joey puts on this crown, and she looks at Pacey, and she smiles, and he just shakes her head, but then smiles back at her, and that was really funny to me. So then Pacey said that he wanted to come. He was like, "Of course I want to come now." And he's like, "Did I say I didn't want to come? All of a sudden, I'm starting to get upside here." And Gretchen says, "Good." And there's a knock on the door, and Gretchen says, she walks over, opens the door, and she says, "Dawson, whoa, you decided to come." And Dawson says, Yeah, I'm cashing in my rain checks." And Gretchen says, "Come on in. Hey guys, look who's joining us." And I'm like, Gretchen, do you not realize that Pacey and Dawson hate each other sometimes? Like, I get like in episode 3, like, they didn't really hate each other, but at the same time they kind of did. So I'm like, there was no thought into this whatsoever. And Dawson says, "Alright, the Mitchmobile is gassed and ready to go. Who's coming?" And Joey says, "Let's go, Pace." And that's very, very, very awkward to me. I'm like, oh, okay. So then we have scene 3 of Pacey and Joey, where they're driving in the Mitchmobile along the road, and Gretchen and Dawson are sitting in the front seat, and Pacey and Joey are in the back seat, and they both look kind of annoyed, not gonna lie. And Gretchen says, "You know, what I just went through my mind, the 4th of July in Conhandus. That was the last time all of us were in the car together. God, you guys were such babies. How old were you, Pacey?" And Pacey says, "I don't know, I don't remember." And Dawson says, "We were 11, you were 14. And Gretchen says, "And you were wearing something red. Is it possible that I remember that?" And Dawson says, "Unfortunately, yeah." And Gretchen and Dawson are laughing, and there's just so much tension in the back seat. But then we have the next scene where they finally arrive to find the driveway to a dark area that is blocked off by a chain. So there's that. And they are walking the rest of the way, and Dawson says, "Could this be any more creepier?" And Gretchen says, "I'll be your map buddy, come on." And Gretchen and Dawson get out of the car, which leaves Pacey and Joey inside the backseat of the car. And Pacey says, "When did they become going out together buddies?" And Joey says, "I believe this is unreal event." And Pacey says, "So then all of the guys from Cape Side that want to be her friend, she picks Dawson. Does that not bother you at all?" And Joey says, "Pace, he's the only person close to her age working at the restaurant." Which makes me think, like, how old is Gretchen? Like 20, 19, somewhere around there? And she says, "Makes perfect sense why they want to be friends." And Pacey says, "No, if I asked if it bothered you," he goes, "No, I asked if it bothered you." And Joey says, "No, it doesn't bother me." And Pacey goes, "It bothers you." And Pacey says, Joey says, "No, it doesn't bother me, it bothers you. And you want it to bother me too." And Pacey says, "So then what's bothering you?" And Joey goes, "You." And she makes this thing where she makes him smile with his fingers, and it's just so funny to me because he's just like, "Are you kidding me?" So there's also something I want to talk about here. I think one of the reasons why Pacey kind of gets annoyed with Gretchen and Dawson, I don't really think that it's I think it's the fact that Gretchen and him are siblings, and Dawson doesn't want to be his friend, but he'll hang out with his sister, which is kind of weird at the same time. Like, okay, you don't want to be my friend, but you want to be my sister's friend? Okay, that's not okay whatsoever. If someone befriended me and all of a sudden started dating my brother, I would feel really, really creeped out, because they know all your secrets, they know everything about you. Even your sibling kind of knows something about you. And it's just really awkward if that ever happened. And it's just like, okay, Dawson, do you really not think that this is going to hurt Pacey? I think at first Dawson didn't really want to go because he didn't want to hurt Pacey. But I don't know why he just automatically just went, "Oh, I'll go." And I'm like, okay. So then we have scene 5 of Pacey and Joey. And they're in the entries of the rave, and Gretchen and Dawson and Joey and Pacey are walking up to find Drew standing there. And Drew says, "Haha, right on. You guys are not so squares than I thought you were. Hi there, we haven't met." And Andy says, "I don't have a problem with that." And Drew says, "Ho ho ho, ouch." And Joey and Pacey are I don't want to say they're hugging in a way, but they kind of are. Pacey is behind Joey, and Joey's wrapped around his arms, which I thought was really sweet. And she laughs at Drew's discomfort, and Joey says, "Someone's out celebrating," and Andy says, "Yep," which, by the way, Andy is on pills that Jen gave her, and no one knows. And Gretchen says, "What are we celebrating?" And Joey says, "Andy got into Harvard." And Jared says, which explains your all of a sudden desperate need to focus on your future. And Jen says, I really don't need you tonight. And Pacey says, you did, just like you said you always would. And he hugs Andy, and Drew says, whoa, Potter, how cool are you? You don't mind that it lasts a split second longer than the X guidelines allow, which... Okay, so, like, obviously Pacey cares about Andy a lot, and Joey knows that. But, like, I don't know, like, in some type of ways, like, they try to make Pacey and Andy in season 4, like, try to make Joey upset about them too, when really there's nothing, like, it's completely over, and Joey knows that, and Pacey knows that, and Andy knows that, and then when they do stuff like this, I'm like, that's not really that big of a deal. Like, there's so many things that go on, and that's what pops up in your head. And Gretchen says, who's that guy? And Dawson says, did you ever meet Abby Morgan? And it's just really funny to me. Like, basically what Dawson was saying is that Drew was the version of Abby Morgan, which, go Dawson. So then they're inside the raid, and all of them enter, and Dawson and Gretchen go off together, while Pacey and Joey, Andy, Jack, and Jen are following behind them. And Andy says, whoa, Jen, this place is beautiful, and there's music playing, and Gretchen and Dawson walk off, and Gretchen starts dancing and walking at the same time, and Gretchen says, woohoo, and Jen says, okay, Andy petting Joey? Not a good way to maintain a low profile. I want to enjoy this, but you're going to have to try to maintain, especially around the people that you're going to come see Monday. And Andy says, I'm okay, Jen, really, you don't have to worry about me, I'm feeling fine. And Jen says, I'm sure you are. Listen, Andy, I want to keep an eye on you tonight, so you're going to have to work with me and stick by me. And Andy says, you're the best, Jen. And she giggles and says, I never knew my hair was so soft. And Jen says, okay, Andy, again, not in the random maintaining. You're going to have to try harder for me, please. And Jack says, there are wild people everywhere. This is going to be a reckless abandonment. And Drew says, which of you, McPhee, is going to dance? And Andy says, me. And Drew says, rock on, sister. And he says, come this way. And Jen says, do me a favor. I want you to keep an eye on Drew and Andy for me. And Jack says, why? And Jen says, trust me, he's not that kind of guy that you want to leave your sister with. Which I wanted to add that part in because I feel like Jen was listening to Joey whenever she talked about, like, Drew. And obviously there was, like, some past with them too. And it's a little bit awkward at the same time, but I like how Jen is, like, protecting, like, Andy the same way that she always protects Joey and Pacey. So then we have scene 1 of Joey, where she's inside the rave, and Joey and Gretchen are in one of those bars talking to each other. And Gretchen says, I'm sorry about Dawson's Sinfu. Because when I invited him, he said no. It didn't even occur to me that he would change his mind. And Joey says, that's okay. I'm kind of glad that we all ended up together. I mean, accidentally or not, things have been getting better, slowly. And Gretchen says, I'm glad to hear it. The three of you have so much history, and Dawson is such a great guy. Which I'm like, what do you see in Dawson? Like, that's just me, personally. Like, I'm not really a big fan of Dawson, so therefore I'm like, what do people see in him? And so Joey says, speaking of Dawson, I know this is none of my business. Is there possibly even a virtuous way, well, something happened with you and Dawson? And Gretchen laughs and says, where did that idea come from? And Joey says, well, obviously you're aware of his incredibly infamous crush on you. And Gretchen says, yeah, the one that ended up when he was like 12. And Joey says, well, you see, Gretchen, Dawson has this way of hanging on to things since he was 12. You know, I mean, sure, waiting around for the right moment to come out again. And, well, if he thinks that there's slightly a chance, and Gretchen says, you know, what I think, if Dawson is waiting for some childhood crush to come along again, he's not waiting on me. Which, basically, she was kind of like, I think she was kind of roasting a little bit of Joey and how Joey is. Where she was like, you know what, like, if he's going to go to anyone, it's not going to be me, it's going to be you. And I feel like Joey was out there trying to protect Dawson in a way, because she knows how he reacted to her and Pacey, so therefore she was kind of scared that he was going to have some reaction if Gretchen said no. But again, I do think that Dawson's not really trying to get back on Pacey, but it was a little bit weird that he's going, like, he didn't want to be with Pacey, but he wanted to be with his, his sibling. There's a lot of weird things there, my friend. Like, okay, like, I get it, I do, but I'm like, yeah, she's pretty. Gretchen's, like, probably one of my favorites when she's not with Dawson. However, I do feel like she can be that type of person where she's connected to Pacey, and just because Dawson doesn't want to be Pacey's friend, somehow Pacey's connected to Joey. And that's what I always think when somehow Dawson ends up dating Gretchen, and Gretchen is Pacey's sister, which may have been a coincidence, but I'm like, Pacey is not going to react in a bad way. But if he dared to react in a bad way, Dawson would make some remark and kind of manipulate him, and it's just kind of funny to me how that stuff works. So then we have the next scene, and it's scene 6 of Pacey and Joey, and they're outside the rave, and Pacey is sitting on the couch outside when Joey comes out, finding him, and walks over to join him. And Joey says, you know, you're violating the secret buddy system. No one ventures out alone, remember? And Pacey says, yeah, well, I would have stayed in there, but I really imitated by all the entrance stops necessary to enjoy the most timeless music known to man. Which I always love how Pacey is so picky with his music. Like, I noticed that several times where Pacey's just like, nope, I don't like that music. And I just wonder throughout the whole, summer trip how much Pacey and Joey fought over the music, because that would have been really funny. And Pacey says, and Joey says, I felt a little bit left out of place, you know, not having dressed in what I could have this been described as a homeland to the Japanese anime. And Pacey says, so why are we here? And Joey says, we're trying something new. And Pacey says, yeah, which is only serves us to let me know how much I really enjoy the old. And Joey says, me too. But I'm glad we came. I mean, if nothing else, to witness the youth of our American firsthand. And Pacey says, if that ain't pretty, but you know, you, madam, are most certainly. And they kiss. And Joey laughs, and she goes, remember how we used to play Barnard's Burger Thoughts? And Pacey says, yes. And Joey says, well, I don't exactly have a Barnard on me, but I could offer you this lovely glow stick. And Pacey says, oh, which I would gladly accept. And he puts it on his head, and Joey gets this huge smile. And I just love how much he smiles at him. There is such a difference from season 3 and season 4, and how she looks at him now. It's one of my favorite things about this season. If you notice, she always kisses his forehead, so that's one of my favorite things. But also, when he does something silly or goofy, she doesn't, tell him off. She just, smiles, and that's what she's doing right now. And Joey says, oh, gives to the world whole Caesar look again. So I did my part, and now I think you're supposed to tell me something deep and profound. And Pacey says, you want to hear something deep and profound, huh? I miss true love, Joey. And he says, I mean, right now, sitting under the stars, my arms around you, let me tell you, I miss true love, something fierce. And Joey says, I miss her too. And Pacey, and Joey lean in together. And I love how she, and him have this huge connection with true love. However, when the boat died, their relationship did not die. I think the relationship got stronger when the storm came, and everything was knocked over and everything happened, but their relationship never once died. They just continued to get better and better and better and better, and that's one of the reasons why I really like them. So then we have scene 7 of Pacey and Joey, and they're inside the roads when Pacey and Joey walk to find Drew and Andy goes up and hugs Pacey, and she says, oh my god, hi, it's you. I love you guys. And she hugs him again, and Drew says she's feeling the love, and Joey says, apparently, yeah. Andy, I think you done enough hugging tonight. And Andy says, I just want to show you guys how much I love you both. You guys are so good together. And Joey, you are so nice. Well, except for the time when you dumped Dawson for Pacey. That was pretty cold. But really, who could blame you? I mean, it's Pacey. Me too, Joe. Me too, Andy. Me too. I felt that. Like, who could blame Joey for going with Pacey? I mean, it is Pacey, and we don't really like Dawson, so it kind of does make sense. And she goes, and then Andy says something that always grabs my attention. It makes me nervous. And she goes, I pretend not to care, but I have to admit, Pace, you are the love of my life, and I'm so not over you. And Joey says, it's news to me, Andy. And Andy says, you totally don't have to worry. Pacey is so over me and the faithful type. If I had been, maybe we'll still be together. And Pacey says, Andy, are you feeling okay? And Andy says, oh yeah, I feel great. And I just got into Harvard. Oh, and we gotta bounce. Come with us. It'll be fun. Come on. And Pacey says, no, you guys go ahead. And Andy says, okay, let's go. Which I feel like that's really, really, really awkward for Andy just to say that. But obviously she was on some pills. So there was that. And then what happens to Andy is she ends up fainting. And everyone rushes her to the hospital. And this is one of the saddest parts of the scene I'll go into in a minute. It's scene 8 of Pacey and Joey, and everyone's at the hospital, and Jack walks to join Dawson, Gretchen, Joey, and Pacey is sitting outside the door. And Jack says, you get him? And Dawson says, take care. And Jack says, thanks. And Gretchen says, how's Andy? And Jack says, she's stable now. They say that she went into some kind of hyperventilating crisis. See, Andy is on the older type of antidepressant, and it turns out, it's a time of a bomb when it makes into the wrong thing. So, in a way, I guess we're pretty lucky the way it turns out that she didn't. And she goes, oh God, she could have died. They want to keep her overnight. So I know she appreciates you guys being here and everything, but I don't think she's in the mood for visitors right now. So maybe you could just go home, give her a call tomorrow, and see how she's feeling. And Gretchen says, you're right. I'm sure she needs her rest. I think we all do. And Jack says, yeah, so I'll see you guys tomorrow. And Jack walks back from the room, and Gretchen says, are you okay, Pace? And Pacey says, no, I should have known something was wrong. I mean, I knew, I just didn't know how bad it was. Which I kind of like how Pacey says that, because it just describes his personality. I feel like Pacey is that type of person, when he sees something's wrong, he doesn't say anything because he doesn't want to cause tension and make it all about him. But then he knows that something's wrong, and later he always regrets not saying anything. And Dawson says, even if you had realized, there's nothing you could have done. And Joey says, yeah. And Pacey says, I think I want to stay here tonight. That's okay. And Joey says, completely. You want company? And Shia hugs him. He says, no, I'll give you a call when I get home, okay? And Joey says, here, in case you need something to rest on. And she hands him her jacket, which I thought was so cute. I'm like, aw, that's so cute. That she just here, if you need something to rest on, have my jacket. And I'm like, Joey, that is one of the cutest things I've ever seen. And so then we have scene 9 of Pacey and Joey. And by the way, at this point, Joey is standing there when Dawson comes out, and Dawson says, beer night, huh? And Joey says, yeah, I'm not even tired. And Dawson says, how about hungry? And they hop in the car. So then we have Pacey comes into the hospital room where Andy is. And Pacey says, okay, hey, it's a 25 cents coffee from the machine, so don't get your hopes up. And this Mr. McPhee, who the last time we saw with Pacey, was basically dragging Andy to the mental hospital. So that's the last time we've seen them two together. And Andy goes, you stayed. And Pacey says, well, I didn't have anything better to do, so I figured I'll stay with you and bug you. And Andy says, you're not bugging me about the things that I said, Pacey. And Pacey says, hey, don't worry about it. What you said doesn't matter. What matters now is that you're okay. And Andy says, thanks. But it's clear, I don't really know, like, I feel like it's kind of clear that Andy has some feelings for Pacey, and I feel like Andy is kind of like Dawson in a way, but she, like, deals with it better. Like, I feel like because of Pacey, like, she deals with it better, but if it was, like, reverse, we all know that that's not how it goes. So I think, like, I honestly always thought that Andy and Dawson would make a great couple. I don't know if that's just me, but I always, like, generally thought them two would be so great together, and then it never happened. I was kind of disappointed. But, like, I think, like, at this moment, Andy just knows that Pacey will always be there for her, even when they're broken up. And I think it kind of showed in this moment, like, yeah, I'll always be there for you, but I may not be there in the way you want me, like, in relationship-wise, but I'll show up when you need me. And while all his friends went home, and all her friends went home, he stayed in that moment, and I feel like that shows so much of Pacey's character because he is very, very loyal, and even Andy said that earlier when she was drugged out. So then we have the last scene, which is scene 2 of Joey, and Dawson and Joey are walking to the end of the dock during a sunrise or a sunset, and stop at the end of it, which I assume it's sunrise because I guess they stayed up all night. And Dawson says, "It doesn't seem right to have such a beautiful sunrise after the night we just had." And Joey says, "I can't shake the way that Andy looked when they had to put her in the ambulance." And Dawson says, "It was scary how things just turned so bad so fast." And Joey says, "It's scary how real everything's been this year, you know? Jen and Pacey in the storm and Andy tonight. Does that make you realize that any of us could go any moment for the stupidest reasons?" And Dawson says, "Yeah. I remember when parties used to be bowling and birthday cakes, you know? Now we have high-risk adventures that could actually kill you." Which, he goes, another peak of growing up in the millennial. I can never say that. I'm like, millennial. Like, when Gen Z's like, man, Gen Z. So, the stupidest thing I've ever done at this age, I would say, is almost getting run over by a train. Which I think I've talked about this before. I was with my best friend, and we were walking down these train tracks throwing nails, and then all of a sudden a train came, and it was so funny now thinking about it. Like, I was laughing at the time. Like, always we were shaken up by it, but I was laughing then, and I still laugh a year later. I'm like, how could we be so stupid? And this train comes, and we, like, jump over the tracks, and I scrape my knee, and it was so funny to me, but we could have died that moment, so I kind of know what they mean by this. And Joey says, "You know, less than a year, Dawson, we're going to be out here." And Dawson says, "Yeah." And Joey says, "It's sad to think that after 18 years of living down the creek from each other, there's going to be no one rowing our boats anymore." Which I always like, they always say 18 years, but I'm like, if they met each other when they were 5, why did they always say, like, remember when we were little, we used to do this, "I've known you for 15 years. And that's what he says when he's 15. I'm like, didn't you know each other for like 10 years? But then he says, like, "Oh, I known you for 10 years, Pacey." And I'm like, okay, I would always think that Pacey and Dawson would know each other, like, for more years than Joey and Dawson. Just me? Okay. It was always funny to me. And so Dawson says, "Well, I wouldn't put our boats in the dry dock just yet." And Joey says, "You got plans for our boats?" And Dawson says, "I do. I think we should give yours to Alexander because I'm going to be giving mine to my new brother or sister." And Joey says, "That's why Gail's been so sick lately. She's pregnant." And Dawson says, "Mm-hmm." And Joey says, "Congratulations. Oh my God. Well, you know, Capeside wouldn't be Capeside without a little Leary running around." And Dawson says, "Or rowing a boat across the creek to get to your house." And Joey says, "Sounds weird, but hearing makes me feel," and Dawson says, "old." And Joey says, "How'd you know?" And Dawson says, "It's the way I felt. Nothing precipitous into your adulthood faster than the next generation nipping at your heels." Which, I'm gonna get a little bit spoiled over here because Dawson has a sister, and I didn't realize that this was, like, from Dawson's Creek until I went back, and you know that audio where it goes, "What's a soulmate?" And then like Dawson gives like a whole reason, and I'm like, huh, that sounds very familiar. And then I see it on the show, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's where that's from. And I just find that really funny to me. And so after they talk about how old they're being, Joey says, you know, Dawson, I think about sometimes, and I think about it sometimes, and whenever we go next, it's going to be hard to imagine life without you. And Dawson says, you did pretty well for 3 months. And Joey says, I think you know what I mean. And Dawson says, yeah, I do. Which I'm like, okay, like, I like that moment, but at the same time, I'm like, why did Dawson have to bring up, you did pretty good for 3 months without me? And I'm like, that was kind of mean. Like, that was kind of really mean. Like, okay, we get it. Like, you're mad at Joey for selling off with her other soulmate, but you don't have to be such a jerk about it. Again, there was a lot of things that happened in this episode. I feel like with Gretchen and Dawson, that was kind of the main thing that really kind of made Pacey and Joey kind of spark up. And then we have Andy, like, going on the drugs and being dangerous and totally unlike Andy after she goes into Harvard. And then lastly, we have Dawson telling Joey that his mom is pregnant. So that's a big deal. And I don't know. I really feel like there's a lot of tension between Joey and Dawson in this episode that I did not like. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Sometimes the episodes are more revolved around Dawson and Joey. And I feel like this is definitely one of those episodes. I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that Pacey wasn't involved in this episode in any type of way, because there was Andy and how Andy kind of still had feelings for Pacey, and it showed in this episode. But I think generally kind of speaking, and there was more scenes about like Joey and Dawson. And I really, really do like how Pacey stayed for Andy, and how he was, even though they were ex, they were always by each other's side. And I like how Joey never really got jealous over that, because I think that was a really big deal. So, if you like this podcast, please make sure to come back on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. Make sure to review this podcast, give it 5 stars, leave a kind review, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, that's Jacey's Great Podcast, and leave your thoughts down below. You can put a thumbs up if you like, but please leave your thoughts down below, whatever you're thinking about this episode or a past episode, or even a future episode that you'd like me to mention. And lastly, if you have not already, make sure to follow my Instagram, that's Witter and Potter, my TikTok, that's Pacey and Joey, and again, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, I post every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Do all the things. Bye guys.